everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad Gustafson and I share two books that we love and we think you should read. When, Brad?
Right now.
You can't even wait for the sands to
Oh,
hit
that's
the
right. Like
hourglass.
literally right now.
I love it when you bring in a prop. That is really like that's pro level stuff.
Exactly. Top notch.
Mm-hmm.
Not all your podcast web streamed things have props, but here we go.
That's right.
It's the level we're at.
That it's another service we're happy to provide.
Yep.
So, how are you, my friend?
So good, Jen. We're surviving the polar vortex here in Minnesota. It's been really cold, like really cold, and things are relative. So when we say from this neck of the woods that things have been cold, it's been like frigid.
I know. Brad was telling me before the show that he was really excited because today felt warm. It was 5 degrees today where you are. Is that correct?
Like spring, yeah, it was crazy. Anyway.
The rest of us are like buying out all the milk and bread because we've gotten flurries, but in Minnesota, you just laugh at us, I know.
No.
So what you been reading this week?
I got a really good one. And a quick random story I wasn't planning on sharing, just a little reading joy because it's always kind of contagious. So I'm doing the bus duty thing. I think maybe the cold weather made me think of this, but outside saying hi to kids as they're pulling up this morning I'm in 20 layers just to try to survive the thing. And I see one kiddo. Often when it's warm, we'll see tons of kids reading and trying to walk into the building, but there was only like one today, partly because I think it was so cold. She's bundled up, and I could tell she was right on like one of the last pages of her book because I looked, and I didn't even bother. I didn't say hi. She was so in it, and I just felt like empathy, like, oh, I know how it is when you're on the last couple pages and you're just in it. So that was no super real point to that story other than to say, isn't it amazing to see kiddos just immersed in human beings, everyone immersed in the books they love.
And it's like you automatically, you know that person's your friend, that shared experience and knowing what it feels like to just have to get through the end. You're like, yeah, that person and we have something in common. I love that.
Right. So hopefully Jen and I can add to your and your students' ability to feel like that and connect. So I have a book that I'm going to promise you, this big words here, that it's my very favorite book in the whole wide world, right? And I kind of had to read that because that's actually the name of the title. It's my very favorite book in the whole wide world. So this is my February read aloud to classrooms, principal read aloud. And a couple of years ago, Jen, I book talked by Malcom Mitchell, The Magician's Hat, if you remember that. And that was I think that was his debut book. So Malcom Mitchell was a Super Bowl champion on the New England Patriots. This is Malcom. Yeah. And one of many reasons I love reading his books to kids is that it shows, and I point this out to them, like you can have a lot of passions and interests in life. It's not football and nothing else. Like you can love football and reading and writing, right? You can be many things. And I think that's just something that's important to keep reminding kiddos to champion lots of different passions and things in their lives. So this book, part of Malcolm's story, if I understand and remember it correctly, is he didn't always feel like super connected to reading and writing, right? That took time and some people to help influence it. So in this second book, it really shines through, and he tells a story, and I'll just kind of give a quick little mini book talk because that's what we do here. So Henley is the main character, and this little guy, he gets this dreaded homework assignment from his teacher, and the homework assignment is bring in your all-time world favorite book in the whole world tomorrow for like sharing or show and tell. That's the assignment. Right. And Henley's freaking out because he doesn't have a favorite book, and all his friends are easily finding favorite books. And so Henley like goes to the public library. He asks for help. He goes to the bookstore, and it's silly, but it also comes through like Malcom talks about, like, so the librarian brought him this huge giant stack of books that Henley would have rather used for pillows, or he wanted to see if they floated in the swimming pool, or all these other things other than reading. That's what he wanted to do with the books. and kids get a kick out of that. And I think some of them kind of relate who aren't there yet. They're just the developing readers. Anyway, eventually Henley comes to learn through the advice of his mom that sometimes the best stories, like our all-time favorite ones, are inside us. And that flips the switch for Henley. He writes his own story, brings it to class for sharing the next day, and is just loving the sharing. And his friends, he gets cheers and a gold star, and all this great stuff happens. So I can say this book is principal approved for read alouds because kids love it. You can really, really get into it and get a little bit silly and just be dramatic with it. But I do recommend, for all those reasons, that you read this right now. It's my very favorite book in the whole wide world by Malcolm Mitchell, illustrated by Michael Robertson.
Wow.
And the pictures, as I hang up and kind of listen to you, Jen, I'll just share a couple. They're very immersive and fun and engaging, and like,
oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So this is the book.
Oh, I love it. You know, there's some really great reminders in there from what you said. I kept thinking about, I'm sure a lot of your teachers have used this before. I know I did as a teacher. But a lot of educators use like reading interest inventories as ways to get to know kids as readers, and then be able to recommend books to them. And one of the lessons it took me a while to learn, but that I finally did, is that sometimes when we word those interest inventories with questions like, what's your favorite book? For those kids who haven't found a favorite book yet, that really is a off ramp to reading as opposed to an on ramp. And so if we can use language that's more a little broader in the way that it sounds like Malcolm's mom did, you know, like, and thinking about the stories that we love most as opposed to a book, or the activities that we love most as opposed to a book, it can really be an on ramp for a kid to something that they didn't realize they loved. Because the thing about the book that's so magical is the story and the connections, and we can all think of those kinds of things even if we don't see ourselves as a reader yet. And I love the way it sounds like Malcolm's mom found a way to harness his passion for writing in his own stories to then realize that stories are the things that fuel books, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that was really well said. It reminds me of the time at Greenwood. We've had a couple times this has happened, but one in particular, a kiddo wrote his own book here. Sure. We put it in the library, we published it, or he published it, and it ended up having this massive waiting list, and how cool he felt, because his book was like, the waiting list was like 40 kids to get to his book. Like, how awesome is that? But it makes me think, in connection with this story, like maybe the on-ramp also is just writing. If someone just isn't there yet with reading, but yet they love art, like have them create a graphic novel, or bind some of their art, and how that could be just a gateway into the world of literacy just through a pretty inclusive on-ramp. So
there's so many. There's just lots of on-ramps. You just have to be creative. And sometimes your kiddos will give you ideas for on-ramps that you just never even thought about when you think about the links between their passions and interests and how that can be connected to reading. They'll provide you with lots of on-ramps. As long as you're willing to take a different route there, you know, then they'll help you get there. I love that. I think that's awesome. You know, every week, Brad, we seem to come up with these parallels between our reading lives. And this week is going to break that rule, because I was sitting there listening to your book talk, and I thought, how am I going to connect that one to what I read this week? And I've decided I'm not even going to try, except I think I can connect it to the story that you told to begin with about being on bus duty and seeing the kid who couldn't put the book down, who was there trying to read and walk and all those things at the same time. Because
that counts. That counts for those keeping track at home. That is a connection.
Okay, well, good. Whew, my record is not broken. So I felt that way this week about the book that I read. I am a slow reader. Despite the fact that I read a lot, I oftentimes find myself having to go back and reread sections. I just, I can't, if I try to read really fast, I find that I don't comprehend a lot of it. So I'm a slow reader. And so when I get immersed in a book that I can't put down, if I say, oh my gosh, I finished this book in 2 days, that's a big accomplishment for me, because I really don't, usually a big, thick book like this will take me a while to get through because I'm slow. But this book, like your friend on bus duty, I could not put down, and I have been anxious to share it with you this week, because it feels like the kind of book that, while on the surface doesn't scream Brad Gustafson, I really think you would actually very much love it. So this book, The Project by Courtney Summers, if you're familiar with any of Courtney Summers' other books, readers who like her books will not be surprised to learn that it's the story of 2 sisters, which is a lot of times the case for her books. In this case, we're talking about 2 sisters, Bee and Lo, which is short for Gloria, okay? And these 2 sisters have an incredible bond. Bee's parents allowed her to pick Lo's name when she was born. Lo's very first word was Bee's name. They have a secret language that they use to communicate with one another. Their bond feels completely unbreakable until their parents are in a terrible car accident in which Lo was in the back seat. Bee wasn't with them. And both parents are killed, and it leaves Lo with this terrible scar running across her face. And in the ICU, they think Lo is not going to live. At this point, Bee is 18, Lo is like 15, and Bee is wondering how she's going to, if her sister survives, how she's going to take care of her now that she doesn't have her parents, right? Lo does survive, but when she kind of awakens from the trauma of her accident, she finds that her sister is gone, has disappeared. She has joined what is known as the Project, which is a religious group that a lot of people call a cult in upstate New York. It's got about a couple thousand members, and it's led by a young, intense, charismatic guy named Lev Warren. Now, Lev is supposedly known for being able to conduct miracles, and his followers believe that he's actually God that's been brought to earth. Now, Lo tries to find Bee and get in contact with her, but the Project will not let her anywhere near her. And as rumors start to swirl around the Project about abuse of members and maybe even murder, the book at the very beginning, all this has taken place at the beginning of the book, then becomes about Lo's hunt to find her sister. And it is told in alternating chapters between Lo's perspective and Bee's perspective. And what's really pretty creative is Lo sort of begins her journey working forward from the accident to try to find her sister. And Bee's perspective begins at working backwards towards the accident. So not only is it alternating between the 2 sisters, but it's different points in time until their stories are finally going to meet at the moment where we learned what's happened to Bee. And not only is this like a huge mystery where like every chapter is a cliffhanger and you are just like, my face is like this the whole time. I'm just so many pages where you're like, what is happening? But also, like, these girls are in peril, and I found myself just worried about them the whole time. I had to keep turning those pages so that I could find out what happened to these girls that I have grown attached to. I don't want to give anything else away because, like every other Courtney Summers book I've ever read, the mystery begins on page 1 and it's not solved until like the last few pages. And every time she surprises me. But I do want to point out one thing that I didn't know until after I was finished. You know how Mr. Shu teaches us to take the dust jacket off of picture books? Because sometimes there's a surprise. Well, this is not the kind of book that I would think, oh, there's going to be a surprise under the dust jacket. And this will only probably be meaningful to people who've read the book. But when you take over take off the dust jacket, there's this quote from the book: "There is no flaw in you." And then when you open the page, it says, "You've been chosen." And when you start reading the book, that will feel so ominous and crazy to you. And I didn't see it until the end after I was finished, and it literally took my breath away. So the book is The Project by Courtney Summers. I couldn't put it down. I loved it so much, and I think you should read it right now.
Incredible book talk. I can't imagine the alternating point of view and then the moments in time colliding from reverse.
Oh, it's so creative. It's like genius. You think, I want to know how her mind works. You know, there's some of these authors where you're just like, whoa, what kind of genius does it take to think of those things? She is really remarkable. Her most famous book, for me anyway, the one I know the most about, is called Sadie, which is also the story of two sisters. And I'm going to say this unequivocally, without any hesitation whatsoever. Sadie was the very best audiobook I've ever listened to, ever. Wow. It was so wonderful. I listened to it several times. So
did she do it?
No, she did not. A full cast did.
Oh, wow.
And it's this is like sort of a bonus book talk, but it's about two sisters, one of whom is missing. And there's a podcast about the missing girls. And so the audiobook includes what is a dramatized version of the podcast.
Oh, so I love it.
It's really cool. It's really, really cool. But I will say her books are really probably for like high school readers. They're pretty intense. I knew some middle school readers that I probably could give this book to, but I'd have to do it on a case-by-case basis because the books can be pretty scary, kind of intense. Yeah. But my high school readers would have gobbled this up. So
this show is dangerous on my budget, Jen. Every time you do a book talk, I'm telling you.
Well,
I still haven't pulled the trigger on that Jennifer. I think it was Jennifer Donnelly one that you did a month or two ago. But I was looking this weekend, and I almost went for it.
Let me send it to you. I have an extra.
Okay.
So we're doing these like deals right here on the show, but this way I can score some points with Deb. Rather than costing you money, I will be trying to make up for it a little bit. Okay?
Well, you're already pretty high up there with Deb, but awesome. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Well, if people can't get enough of our crazy banter and they want to learn more about the books we're reading and love, where can they go, Brad?
We have an awesome repository of books and titles and links and video footage if you want to rewatch your shows. But anyway, bit.ly/read_this_now if you just want to cruise the spreadsheet and look at the titles and kind of grade recommendations, archived by year.
Yes. And we've been doing this for 3 years. Can you believe it, Brad?
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about when I book talked that original Malcom Mitchell book, picture book, and that was several years ago. So pretty cool.
Hundreds of books, years of two friends chatting about reading. It's good stuff. And I'm so happy we get to do it.
Quick question on the spreadsheet that we just talked about, when we put like MG for middle grades, how should and for people looking at it, if it's like middle grades but also above, will we put both middle grades and high school, or do we just put middle grades knowing that of course high school would like it too?
For me, I feel like, first, I'm just going to say that our recommendations as far as grade level are loose. You all know your kiddos better than we do. So they're just based on the learners we've worked with. But I feel like any book, if I put middle grades, and I mean certainly kids older than that, could access it as well.
Got it. Okay.
The thing is if you're not sure, you can, it's easy to just look up a review or watch our show. Yeah. Sometimes we go into much more depth about specific readers in the show itself, but in the archive we just do. Honestly, I do the little notations because I get a real big kick out of looking at how many books we've done that are picture books, young adult, etc. Help me make sure that we're keeping a balanced diet for our 3.5 viewers.
Nice.
All right, well, until next week, everyone, happy reading. Thanks, friend.
Perfect timing, Jen. Perfect timing.